Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today I want to be discussing who I think the final boss will be or should be for Campaign 3, as there are obviously two options. But before I truly get into it, I just want to mention spoilers for Campaigns 1, 2, and 3. Literally right up to the moment we're watching live for streams, episode 76. Spoilers, 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 spoilers. I don't think I can say it enough, but I don't want to get people getting all upset saying, you didn't tell us you would be spoilers. 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 So there are pros and cons to both potential characters being the true final villain. With Ludinus, there is a plethora of reasons that he would be a better final villain, mainly with him being the one that's gotten a lot of build up throughout the entire campaign. Literal physical build up, not like more like, words or history, ancient history. We've literally seen this character throughout multiple campaigns at this point, especially if you were someone who watched campaign 2. You saw this character sort of floating around in the background and sort of putting his nose in places where he didn't necessarily belong. He was just kind of there sometimes, which made him really interesting. So when the reveal dropped that he was in this campaign, I literally was shocked. Now, not everyone's going to feel the same way about this character because they didn't necessarily watch Campaign 2. So now seeing him in Campaign 3 is just, oh, it's another dude who is a villain. This character has been around for a while and was really interesting and really cool to see that a character that Matt has set up to be a villain in a different campaign has finally shown up. So he has had a lot of build up and received a lot of, oh shit sort of moments, like, oh, here he is again. And I think that's really cool and really interesting for a villain. And for him to be the final villain would receive a ton of payoff that we've been watching him throughout the entirety of this campaign and a little bit in the last campaign. So to me, him being a final villain has been built up to so much that anything else would feel kind of weird and wrong. That being said, Predathos has also seen a good amount of buildup with the whole mystery surrounding Ruidus and the idea that he is a god killer, or it is a god killer. And I think that both of them realistically have received good buildup to where they're both worthy of being the final villain, and it's not going to feel like someone has been shagged out of the final villain moniker. But there are other reasons why I think one would be better than the other as a final villain, so let's start breaking those down. Ludinus is a more compelling villain in certain aspects, as he is the one we've seen a lot of physical build up for. We've seen him in the story physically a handful of times. It's not just, oh shit, we have these tales of him killing gods. He is a character who is involved in many, many, many character backstories, mainly with Imogen, as he is the one who literally took Liliana to the dark side, Liliana being Imogen's mother. He is the reason Fern's parents separated from her because they wanted to get involved with stopping these Malleus keys being made because they didn't want the destruction of the Fey realm. He is the potential reason that Gianna Huxham even has or had a crate from the Cerberus Assembly, and that is why there is a piece of Dunamancy stuck in Ashton's head, and he is the literal reason that Orum's husband and father figure are both dead, as he is the one who sent Odahan Thule to potentially try to release the Raven Queen's champion. So he connects to 4 of our 7 characters, and for him to be the final villain would be such a cathartic moment for all of these characters who connect to him in that sort of way, as opposed to it being a big monster who doesn't necessarily connect to anybody with the exception of Imogen and Fern, as they are both Ruidus born, and that is where the connection comes from for Predathos for a lot of these characters. Outside of that, realistically, Predathos doesn't have that sort of connection. So I think as a connection-wise for making a fulfilling final villain, Ludinus sort of takes the cake here by a large margin. However, with all that being said, the only way for Ludinus to be the final villain is if they are to stop Ludinus from being able to release Predathos. There is no way in hell Predathos isn't the final villain if Predathos is released. So, do I believe the Bell's Hells are capable of defeating Ludinus in this potential final battle? No. I think this is the first group out of all the campaigns where I'm genuinely concerned that people are going to die or just straight up lose in this fight. I think there is a very, very good possibility, and I have my reasons. When you look at Vox Machina, not only did they have vestiges, but they also had Dremel specifically designed to kill the main villain, and they had all of the gods backing them, because this was a new god and they wanted to defeat Vecna, and they needed him dead. So they had a bunch of items specifically designed to kill him. They had powerful magic items that they had collected to kill dragons beforehand, which would also greatly help in killing him. And they had a bunch of gods backing them who weren't nerfed, who weren't being suppressed, who weren't afraid of death at this point. They just didn't want this new god. When it came to the Mighty Nine, they didn't have a whole whack of gods backing them, nor did they have a bunch of vestiges. They did have a vestige, but this team was also like the best constructed team they've ever had. There was an extremely powerful wizard, one of the best multi-classes to ever exist in Hexblade Paladin, and it was fucking disgusting watching Ford fight because he was amazing, and he was the one with a vestige. You also had a monk who was really good at stunning things. You had two colossal healers, even though Jester didn't like to heal all that much. She could when she did. And there was two massive healers here, so Caduceus was also backing them up. And everything else surrounding it was also very solid. There was a basically unkillable barbarian. This team was designed to fight a final boss, and it was very good in what they did. And not to mention, they had some sort of mental game to play with the boss, as it was one of their former allies. So there was a handful of layers for them to take this boss on and potentially weaken his mind as they went. And yeah, none of this exists for Campaign 3. There is a single god backing them. Granted, that being said, there are other gods hoping they do well, but not too many of the player characters here are necessarily religious in any sense of the meaning. Most of them actually say, if the gods die, c'est la vie, we don't really care, we just want to stop lewdness. They don't have many vestiges of divergence, at least not that we know of yet. They did have one, but they gave it up to a skeleton man. So, realistically, their arsenal, their weaponry, their firepower, and their healing are on a much lower level than what we've had before. Yes, there are two characters with Revivify. Yes, two characters can technically heal. But when was the last time either FCG or Fern has done tremendous healing? They haven't. The last time I can really think of them doing a good job healing anybody is when they started reviving people, and they only revived one. So realistically, it wasn't all that great, and now they're in a deep shithole if they have to fight someone super strong like Ludinus. I do genuinely believe that this is the team out of any other team that we've had before who could potentially lose a fight like this, and then the true final villain emerges, and we now have to fight Predathos and Ludinus. And I can imagine that the boss rush leading up to this point, for them to even fight Ludinus to begin with, is going to be a pain in the ass. They're going to have to go through Odahan Thule and Liliana at least before getting to Ludinus, which would automatically deplete them of all of their resources. So they might be running on empty as they try to fight Ludinus, and they're already at a negative sort of advantage here. They don't really have anything going on for them outside of teamwork, and as we've seen in the past, their teamwork doesn't always work out in this campaign. This campaign has been the one showcasing the most of their chaotic nature, and their chaotic nature hasn't really helped them, especially with the fight against Odahan Thule, as they sort of went in several different directions, and it got three of them killed, but two of them were revived, and we can see that this very well could play out as they move through. What if someone drops dead in a fight earlier against Liliana or Odahan Thule, and they have to revive them early, and now they're even in way more of a shithole as when they go to fight Ludinus. There's a ton of reasons that I could see them going through this point and losing to Ludinus, and there's very few paths of success, and the only way you realistically do that is if you flawlessly defeat both Odahan Thule and Liliana. That being said, they could fight those characters way before and not have to really worry about this whole issue. They could fight one of them as they're going to the moon now, so that couldn't be necessarily a huge problem, but I guarantee you there's still going to be something standing in the way in between the players and Ludinus as they go for this final attempt at him. So realistically, I can see many, many, many ways for the Bell's Hells to lose, and then they have to fight Predathos somewhere else on the line, and I can only see a handful of ways for them to beat Ludinus and not having to fight Predathos. So, with all that being said, I think Predathos is going to be the one who we fight last as our main villain, because it is going to just be released, and now Ludinus is going to be another obstacle standing in the way of fighting Predathos. So I've talked a lot about how Ludinus is a good connection for the players and how he is a good main final villain for them to potentially beat before releasing Predathos. But Predathos is cool in its own way. It is a monster that is scaring gods. Literally has killed two in the past. At least two in the past. We're just going to throw that out there because I think it could have been more, like minor gods or some shit that they don't really care about. But truly, this character or this creature, this entity, is really cool and really interesting to me. It is something that has been looming over every campaign we've watched up to this point and is going to be significantly more interesting as a literal final boss. Because if you look at Vecna, if you look at Lucian, and if you look at Ludinus, they're all humanoid. They're all roughly the same. Yes, Ludinus and Vecna both went through a transformation, and they looked slightly less humanoid, but there was still humanoid factors to them. Vecna was just a little bit bigger and with a lot of lightning surrounding him, and there was this whole thing that happened to the lower half of Ludinus, but he still had the upper angelic body of a human. Ludinus would be in the same boat. He would literally just be a humanoid figure that we're looking at, and I don't think that could be, as interesting as it could be. Predathos is going to be some sort of massive celestial creature thing. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it's going to be like at all. And I think that's way more interesting just as a concept alone to sort of think about what the final fight could look like. When I envision a final boss fight, I don't want it to be necessarily against another humanoid creature. We've had that in 2 previous campaigns, and for me, I want something new, I want something creepy, I want something massive, I want something monstrous. And I think as far as everything that we've heard about Predathos, he or it fits that billing so much better than Ludinus. Ludinus to me feels like what I said earlier as a good character to really devastate the party again and then being able to succeed in what he's trying to accomplish. But after that, I think Predathos just eats him, and now we have Predathos as a main final villain who is massive, sort of different, something we haven't really experienced before, and is now this just looming threat of death. And I think that is way cooler than having another humanoid figure standing in front of the party yet again for a final boss fight. But that's just me. And there you have it. The final boss conversation that I've kind of wanted to have for a little bit, as I think it's kind of interesting to look at it. And now that we have Ludinus sort of intervening with simulacrums and all that sort of shit, it is definitely an interesting time to talk about it because we're now finally leaning into that final stage of this campaign of shit's getting real, so we have to start taking it seriously. And looking at who the villains are and looking at who the final villain could be, to me, is like the most serious conversation you could have about a campaign. So, yeah, very interested in to see who the villain is. Very interested in to see what we're going to get going forward from this point, as now we know that Ludinus is getting more physically involved in dealing with the main party. So, yeah, very interested in seeing what's happening. And as far as what's happening on Friday video is going to be the recap of the Mighty Nein reunion Echoes of the Solstice instead of the player character death battle that I've been doing at the end of every month. That'll be pushed off to later in November because there's going to be a break in November at some point, either if it's Thanksgiving or if it's going to be the last week, who knows. But eventually there is going to be a break in November, and we're going to be able to have that video placed there. So, yeah, if you're looking forward to that this month, sorry, but when something else pops up, it fits in. So yeah, simple as that. I'll see you guys on Friday for the Mighty Nein reunion. So hyped for that. And until then, peace.